It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
It's the Happy Families podcast. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson, the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. I'm here with Kylie, my wife, mum to our 6 kids, and oh boy, have we got some stuff to talk about. It's been a huge week on parental guidance. We've talked about it for the last 2 episodes. We've played, for those of you who are overseas and don't get to see the show, we've played as much audio as we possibly can. For those of you who haven't seen it, hopefully you're catching up on the 9 Now app. Parental guidance returns again this Sunday night so that we can find out more about, oh my goodness, there's some big challenges coming up. What would you do if a delivery driver knocked on the door and said, I've got a package for you, but it's a bit heavy. Can I bring it in and put it on the kitchen bench? What would you do if you were a 9-year-old answering the door to that delivery driver? That's what we're going to find out about.
Well, I was just about to say that chances are they wouldn't have a chance to knock on the door because most delivery guys leave it in the easiest place possible. Like, do you know, I caught the delivery guy dropping 10 boxes off to our house the other day and he couldn't even ring the doorbell. He left it right in front of the driveway, in front of our gate.
That sounds really flustering.
It was.
Yeah,
I couldn't get into my driveway.
I can tell. That was inconsiderate, wasn't it?
So I think it's very highly unlikely that they wouldn't even bother knocking.
Today is not about your delivery driver woes. Today is about the big stuff that we didn't get to talk about over the last 2 episodes of the podcast because there's been so much to talk about. Where do you want to start?
This is really just a comment more than a conversation starter. Deepak and Kajal.
Yeah, the spiritual parents.
They are just so beautiful.
Life is all about, as spiritual parents, just taking a few uncomfortable steps and expanding your circle of comfort.
Do you know what I love about them? Okay,
You're just so beautiful.
we have got to talk about the reverse parking situation, okay? Our children are our greatest teachers. We've got to listen to our children. There's all of this beautiful stuff that they're saying, but when the rubber hits the road, literally, they're in the car and there's a reverse parking thing, didn't work out quite so well. We're going to come to that in a sec. But before we do that, can I just make a quick statement? When it comes to spirituality in today's world, and specifically religiosity, we become deeply secularized. And while you and I have a religious life, and this may sound self-interested, I'm speaking specifically as a scientist here. I love that these people are on the show with their spirituality front and center. Like, they've made a couple of really big errors. There's a reason they didn't make it through to the final challenge. We saw the smoke alarm mistakes. We saw the reverse parking issue. They didn't know how to teach their children about basic human anatomy and the reproductive system. There were some really egregious errors that meant that no matter how beautiful they are, they didn't make it through to the next challenge. But my goodness, I love their humility. Every time they make a mistake, they say, I can see that. I need to do better.
And that's why we're here. We want to be better. We want to learn.
I love that. But I want to talk about the secularization of our society and highlight specifically the morality that comes with a spiritual life is absolutely undeniably available to people who are not religious and who are not spiritually oriented. I'm not going to make any kind of an argument that you must be spiritual or religious to be a moral person. That's a load of garbage. But from a scientific point of view, there is so much evidence that people who live in spiritual and religious communities, I guess, do tend to live their life differently and experience a whole lot of well-being benefits. They're more likely to have stronger social circles because the religious or cultural community that they're associated with boosts them up. They're more likely to volunteer and serve and give, which is fantastic for our well-being. They tend to be more optimistic and hopeful about the future. In fact, I could just give this huge long list of what secularization is removing from the lives of people on the planet today who are moving in that direction rather than the spiritual direction. This isn't an advertisement for everyone going and joining a church or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying.
There are plenty of people out there who are spiritual without having a religious
totally
belief structure around that. I think for me, one of the things that really stands out is people who have a spiritual belief structure. They also have the capacity to slow down through, their meditative states, prayer, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. In a world that is just so fast-paced, you've got this opportunity to become reflective, to sit and to ponder and to really just meditate on the important things to you.
So secularization And there's plenty of arguments about what it's doing to our youth as well. But I love the way Deepak and Kajal, spiritual parents, front and center, this is the life we're trying to live. And they really gave us a front seat view of how they do that in their home. And my goodness, those kids, I mean, those kids.
You said we weren't going to talk about this very long.
Yes, I know.
But the other thing that came out of their comments
You're so funny.
was the fact that they live with their parents.
Oh, yeah. How generous.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was the line where they said, we are learning to let go of our parenting, inverted commas, ours, theirs, and recognize that there are things that we can learn and our children can learn from our parents.
And we can see that our kids have actually grown from this influence of grandparents in their lives. It's also, again, it's us letting go of our complete 100% parenting.
And I think about all of the conversations we have on here from, listeners sending in their emails. How do we deal with our grandparents? How do we deal with, they're not parenting the way we want.
But they have some wisdom to share.
Yeah. And I've been that person. My mother-in-law drives me crazy. My mother drives me crazy. Yeah. There are so many times where I get frustrated because they don't know what I know. And yet there's just this beautiful sense of humility that there is something I can learn from them. And I wonder how much better our families would be if we all felt that way.
I just think they're a beautiful, beautiful couple, and I love their humility, like you said.
But we have to talk about Deepak and his comment.
Oh, the reverse parking.
During reverse parking.
Here's what happened.
This way, go left.
He's saying that way?
Left.
Up until the front.
Left.
No.
Towards
When she
me.
says this way, it's opposite. Okay. Rely on yourself as well as Mridula, but rely on yourself more.
One of the children, the youngest, Mridula, 7 years old, is being asked to give mum directions as she reverse parks the car, parallel parks the car. It's a tight squeeze.
She's not allowed to use mirrors.
No mirrors, no cameras.
Or cameras.
We actually put cardboard and tape over it so that they couldn't use them.
This, for any driver, would be a scary situation.
Not me.
Of course not.
Go a little bit back. Back, stop.
Give and go a little bit.
Stop.
Yeah, reverse.
You're going to hit the car, stop.
No, not just straight, just go reverse. That's it.
You're going to hit the car, go forward. You're going to hit the car.
Oi!
You didn't listen to her.
Oh, no.
Okay, our kids need a voice. Our kids need a voice. And he was humble about it and he learnt his lesson beautifully. But what a profound conversation to be able to have now.
How many of us actually get a bird's eye view of the way that we interact with others? We have this ethos, we have this belief system, and we espouse to being a parent who blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
How many of us actually get to see in real time how that plays out on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, because this isn't really about Deepak. This is about all of us. And I know there have been a couple of times where the children have, because kids have always got their phones going. There's been a couple of times where the kids have had the phone going and they've been videoing whatever's going on in the kitchen or the dining room or the living room. And then an hour or two later, I walk past them as they're playing it back and I hear my voice. And I hear the way I'm speaking to one of the kids about picking something up or helping out in the kitchen or closing the fridge or turning off the light. And I think to myself, oh my goodness, do I sound like that? Is that what I'm really like? Next time you're interacting with your children about a discipline issue, record it. Open up your voice notes on your telephone and record it and have a listen to yourself back when you have the chance and hear how you really sound. And also ask yourself, if I wasn't recording it, would I sound like this? Or am I sounding as good as I can because I'm recording it?
That's actually pretty cool.
Oh, it's amazing.
You would actually change the way you do things, even if it was just because you pushed record.
This is why this TV show is so great, though, because you get to see yourself in a way that you don't normally see yourself. You get the objective view.
Well, even with the stage parents, there was that line where she said,
River is probably best known for his role of Jai in Home and Away. He absolutely loves it. Sometimes I force him to get photos with people because I don't want to be rude.
And then as she was being questioned about that in the room, she acknowledged that it was just an off-the-cuff comment that she made and it clearly didn't come across the way that it actually is.
We do this all the time.
This is just a powerful way for us to actually hold the mirror up to ourselves and recognize that we're all kind of in the same boat, right? We have...
Which is why I don't want people to say that this is a judgy show, because it's not. I think these families are just so brave and they've all done such a great job. Kylie, we need to talk about a second big thing that happened this week. I mean, there are about 8 more things we could talk about, but I have to talk about the teen parents and their oldest son, Matthew, and the way that he responded. And also, it wasn't just Matthew, it was also Zion, the stage parent's son, 2 boys in front of a computer screen, and the prompts come up, you need to be 18 or over, you need to be an adult to continue.
In some ways, this challenge feels a little bit unfair.
Right.
You've got 2 boys.
Yep.
And you've got a 17-year-old plus a 13-year-old.
Yep.
And then you've got, 2 11-year-old girls or a 7-year-old?
Yeah.
A 7-year-old girl
girls.
and an 11-year-old girl.
Yep.
And before you even watch the footage, you can almost be certain you know where this is going to go and how each of those children are going to respond. But I think what came out of it was the dialogue that followed those challenges and the absolute double standard we have as a society about what is appropriate behaviour for girls and boys.
I mean, I'm actually fine. He's a boy. We discussed pornography, all that kind of stuff. I know that he's seen it.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, like, boys are curious. They're going through that sort of stage in their life.
So if your daughter was doing it, do you think she would have clicked yes or no? Do you think?
No, she's not interested. She's not that type of person.
Can I ask, do we have different standards then for girls and boys?
Maybe it's just a bit of a cultural norm that, well, it's okay for boys to do that, but would be surprised if the girls did.
Well, I think girls get tarnished for being explicit and for being sexual.
Yeah, for sure. That was really uncomfortable, that it was fine. It's, this is what teenage boys do, that's fine. Well, but my girls would never do that. And that's like total double standard, that it's okay for your sons to objectify someone else's daughter. Like, that's what it comes down to. She's someone's daughter.
I'm just going to say it. Pornography is a blight on our society, not just for children, for adults as well. But I'm not going to get caught up in the conversation about whether adults should or shouldn't be consuming about it. What I am going to get caught up in is this. There is not a shred, not a little bit, not the slightest, scantest, a little bit of evidence out there that supports the idea that consuming explicit content for children can possibly have any benefits for them. It only has negative outcomes. And yet we're in a world that is absolutely flooded with it. I said it in the show and I'll say it again. The research evidence that we do have suggests that 14 to 17-year-old boys are the number one consumer of explicit content in the world.
And they proved that.
And we saw that happen in the show with no hesitation. And I love Mark and Leanne, the teen parents, but the attitude that they've brought to it, I know they're going to be looking at it. Once the doors close late at night, they're in their bedroom, they've got their phones. Who knows what they're really looking at? We do know what they're really looking at, and it's a problem because it changes their beliefs and it changes their behaviors. It affects the way that they interact with the girls that they date, or the boys for that matter, depending on how they're oriented in the world. It affects every single thing that happens in terms of those expectations when they have those interactions. And what happens in those interactions can, does, and will cast a long shadow into the lives, particularly of the girls who are affected by their behavior in that situation.
I would also suggest that it would actually increase the likelihood of earlier activity.
As far as I'm aware, we don't have any evidence for that. That is, if you start viewing explicit content earlier, we don't necessarily have evidence that you're going to end up engaging in physically intimate and sexual activity earlier. But what we do know is when you do engage in it, your expectations have been affected by what you've seen. And I'm going to be really explicit about this. So please, parents, if your little kids are listening, you probably want to just press pause and come back to this in a minute or two. If your big kids are listening, I'm not going to be going too far or anything like that. I've had so many parents come up to me at school nights when I've given a talk about this kind of topic, and there's usually dads, and they've taken Mark's approach. So again, this isn't about Mark and Leanne now. This is about how parents are viewing this situation.
And I guess that's my comment from the beginning. It's a conversation about a different standard that we hold for our boys as opposed to our girls. The conversation around our boys are curious doesn't hold up for me, because curiosity, if I have a curious child, where do I want them to go to find the answers?
You want them to go to you, not to the internet, not to Google, not to Pornhub.
That's basically just abdicating my responsibility as a parent.
So here's the point
to help my kids.
Here's the point that I really want to make, though. The content that kids see on the internet today when they're looking up anything explicit it's true that there's a whole lot of content that's out there that's, I guess, in line with what we think of from the 1980s, 1990s, the glossy magazines that, quote unquote, Dad used to hide under the bed. Not that my dad or your dad ever did that, but that's the standard line that's out there. The material that's out there today is not like that. Today's most popular explicit content, today's most popular pornography, according to all of the researchers that I've talked to or read from, is violent. It's misogynistic. It includes acts including choking, hitting, slapping, spitting, punching. It includes harm being done to women. And if not harm, derogation and belittling. It includes things that most adult women who have any level of confidence in their sexuality are not going to be seeking in their intimate involvement with somebody that they love and cherish and want to be with. The conversation about pornography is critically important, and we saw why in parental guidance, because these kids were just happy to click the button. There was no hesitation.
So there wasn't actually a lot of conversation on the show about how we empower our kids and give them the skills that they need to be able to navigate this challenge. I mean, the reality is our kids are curious.
Yeah. So I've written for the federal government on the E-Safety Commissioner's website several articles. We've also got a couple of podcasts where we've discussed this as well. Here it is in like 15 seconds or less. Number one, teach your kids what pornography is and let them know that it's bad for them. Research shows that on average, they're seeing it somewhere around the age of 11 or 12. On average. Some kids obviously therefore are seeing it a lot younger. Some are seeing it older. You know your kids, but also you don't know everything. So somewhere between the age of, I'm going to say 8 and 12, you want to sit down and have a conversation about what pornography is and ask them to avoid it. Ask them if their friends have talked about it. Ask them if they've seen it. And then talk early and talk often. Talk about issues around consent. Talk about issues around explicit content. Ask what's happening in the playground and make these conversations normalized so the kids can feel safe. If your kids have seen it, you actually want to say to them, not necessarily what did you see, but more how did it make you feel? And you want to normalize the fact that if you see something explicit, something nude or something sexual, it's probably going to actually make you feel a little bit interested and curious and maybe even aroused and excited. But it's also probably going to make you feel a little bit icky, like you know that you're not supposed to be watching this. I think that you've got to have the conversation with your kids and be upfront and honest about it. The influencer parents are all about that, right? Have the honest, upfront conversations. Do it early. Do it often. That's where my sense is we can have the biggest impact. For more, we can link in the show notes to where you can get better resources, but I think that's a quick summary. Kylie, we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more we could talk about, but we have absolutely blasted through our time limits for this podcast. I hope, folks, that you're enjoying the discussions. Are you having fun?
Yeah.
And I love how our kids are enjoying the show as well. The Happy Families podcast returns with I'll Do Better tomorrow. First thing in the morning. We can't wait to share that with you. And then Sunday night, episode 5 of Parental Guidance, we are introduced to 4 new sets of parents, a whole lot of new challenges. Oh, it's going to be a cracker. Can't wait.